All right, I'm here with Megan McCarthy from Mediagazer. Just talked about rest in peace Jeff Goldblum about internet hoaxes. And first of all, how many of these internet hoaxes do y'all see every day at Mediagazer?
I think that it's not necessarily a common occurrence, but it's also not necessarily an uncommon one. It's definitely one that I'm familiar with, and it's not necessarily even hoaxes themselves, because hoaxes, to me at least, imply some sort of maliciousness to them. A lot of it is just misinformation or miscommunication. So you see a lot of that, and you will sort of hear something out of the corner of your attention, and sort of go to pay a little more attention to it to see whether or not it is just a story or if it's something that is just chatter. So
What do y'all go through to make sure a story's legit? Or
what do I do? Well, I as I said in the talk, I try and do three things. Like, first and foremost, I try and know the source. Once I figure out who the source is, I'm better able to tell whether or not to give it legitimacy. Knowing the sources that's how kind of news brands work. Like, if something comes from the New York Times, you're obviously going to trust it more than if something comes from like TMZ, for instance. Like, the exact same thing happened with the death of Michael Jackson, where TMZ actually reported it early, but none of the mainstream media actually confirmed the report until the New York Times, the LA Times had actually confirmed it as well. So that's step one. Step two is sort of know what the information is that they're talking about. If there's a link in there, check out the link. Is the information consistent, the way it's presented with the person and how that they normally speak, they normally talk? Is this something that's likely for this person to be talking about? Is there a plausible reason? And the way you know that is step three, and that's sort of know the big picture. Like, once you figure out where the lay of the land is, you're able to sort of see like where you can see the map. Then you're able to tell, you know, what pops up on it and if it belongs where in the quadrant that you see it. So,
what do you think about the? I don't know if it's. I guess it is a recent trend since Twitter hasn't been around so long, but the trend of using Twitter as a source.
I think Twitter can be a very interesting source. Again, if you go back to the first step of knowing who it is that's controlling the Twitter account, they do have verified accounts now. You also have, you can look at, for instance, who's following them, who they're following, who they communicate with, who communicates with them. That should give you a good indication of whether or not the Twitter account belongs to the person that they're trying to say it belongs to. If it's an account that has no followers or only spam followers, then it might not be as legitimate as you think it is. Twitter is a mechanism of communication, so I think it is definitely something where you would be able to quote it, for instance, or use it as sort of the germination of a new story that's about to come out, that you can take that information that somebody puts out on Twitter and then go use it to go find out and write a story based on that. So I do think that is a legitimate a way to use Twitter.
Do you think it might be time for old media to come up with a new ethics standard for?
I think that, you know, the ethics of Twitter and things like that is something that's definitely interesting, because you can have people can put things out on Twitter that they don't necessarily like. For instance, as I mentioned in my talk about how the CEO of the startup Plancast made a joke about Owen Van Natta, the ex-CEO of MySpace, joining Plancast, joining his startup. That was aimed at a couple friends of his, and it was sort of an inside joke, but it became something that was much more public because it was this. And if he had said it in a bar, it would have been fine. But because he said it on Twitter, somebody took that information and used it in a news report. So there is sort of an ethics around that. So I don't necessarily think that those questions have been resolved yet. So it's definitely something to think about, though.